The courtroom was heavy with silence. You could almost hear the air itself trembling, with tension as David sat there, in his sleek gray suit, his arm wrapped proudly around Emily, the young blonde, woman who had replaced 15 years of marriage with a few months of excitement. His smirk was wide, his confidence unshaken. He looked like a man who believed he had already won a cross. The room sat Monica, his wife, a beautiful black woman with deep brown skin and eyes that told stories of sleepless nights and unspoken pain. She was calm, her face unreadable, her hands folded neatly on the wooden table before her. The light from the window fell across her face, making her look almost regal, but there was something behind her stillness, something powerful, something that made the room feel colder than it should have been. When the judge called their names, David leaned forward and grabbed the pen from the table, twirling it between his fingers, as if this was just another deal he was closing, another business victory. He looked at Monica, then at Emily, and with a loud, arrogant laugh, he said, "I'm finally free." His voice echoed through the quiet courtroom, the words sharp enough to cut through the air like knives. Emily smiled, her perfect teeth flashing, as she leaned in, whispering something into his ear. David chuckled and nodded before he bent over and signed the papers with a dramatic flourish. The scratching sound of the pen felt deafening. Monica didn't flinch. She didn't move. Her eyes stayed on the papers, and when he slid them across the table to her, she reached out slowly, her hand steady, no trembling, no hesitation. For a brief moment, their eyes met, David's full of pride, Monica's calm and unreadable, and in that moment, something strange happened. A tiny smile flickered across her lips, a small, almost invisible smile that made David's grin fade just a little. It wasn't a smile of sadness or defeat. It was a smile of knowing, a smile that whispered, "You'll see soon enough." The judge cleared his throat, preparing to move on, but the room still felt tense, heavy, like everyone could feel there was more to come. Monica took the papers, signed her name neatly, then placed the pen down with quiet precision. She looked at David and said softly, "Thank you, that was all," she said, but the way she said it made even the judge glance up. Something in her tone carried a kind of quiet finality. David smirked again, thinking she had accepted defeat, thinking the story was over, but he had no idea that the woman he had just walked away from wasn't broken. She was preparing something he would never forget. Monica and David's story had started like something out of a dream. They met when David was struggling, barely keeping up with rent, and working long hours at a small construction company. He was ambitious, full of ideas, but had no direction, and no one believed in him until Monica came into his life. She was smart, focused, and full of compassion. She saw something in him that he didn't even see in himself. She believed in his potential, and she pushed him to chase it. In the early years, they were inseparable. She helped him draw up plans for his own business. She stayed up late typing proposals, balancing accounts, talking to investors, while David handled the field work. She used her own savings to get him started, and when banks said no, she found another way. She worked 2 jobs at one point just to keep them afloat. They built their first office together, painting the walls themselves, laughing and dreaming about the future. Every success they had, they celebrated together. Every setback they faced as a team. But success has a strange way of changing people. When the money started flowing in and David's name began appearing in magazines, something inside him shifted. He started dressing differently, talking differently, and soon he started treating Monica differently too. The man who once looked at her with admiration now barely looked at her at all. His business trips got longer, his excuses got shorter, and his affection disappeared like smoke. Monica tried to hold on. She tried to remind him of where they started, of how they had dreamed this life together, but he brushed her off, saying she was too controlling, too serious, that he just wanted to live a little. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to think. It was just stress until the night she found a message on his phone, a message from a woman named Emily, calling him my love and asking when he would tell his wife. The words hit Monica like a thunderstorm. She felt the ground fall beneath her feet. The man she had sacrificed everything for, the man she had lifted from nothing, had chosen someone else. When she confronted him, he didn't even try to hide it. He looked her in the eye and said coldly, "You should be grateful I gave you a good life, but I deserve to be happy too." That night, Monica cried harder than she ever had, before she sat on their bed surrounded by memories, pictures, and plans that now meant nothing. But when the tears finally stopped, she took a deep breath, wiped her face, and whispered to herself, I may have lost a husband, but I haven't lost myself. From that moment on, she stopped being the woman who begged to be loved and became the woman who was planning her revenge. After that night, Monica changed. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She didn't even ask questions. She simply moved with quiet purpose. She told David she agreed to the divorce, her voice calm, her face expressionless. Her reaction confused him. He expected tears, drama, maybe even begging, but she gave him none of that. She just said, if you want freedom, I'll give it to you. Her tone so peaceful it almost frightened him. David took her calmness as weakness. He thought she was defeated, that she had accepted her fate. He even bragged to his friends that she was taking it well, that she knew she couldn't survive without him. What he didn't know was that while he was busy showing off his new relationship, Monica was busy preparing her next move. She wasn't broken, she was focused. She hired one of the best lawyers in town, a sharp, brilliant woman named Grace Williams, who had seen countless men like David, men who underestimated women, especially the ones who built them up from nothing. Monica brought her every document, every receipt, every proof she had kept over the years because she had always been the one handling their finances. She knew the company inside and out. She knew every transaction, every contract, every investment. She had managed it all while David was taking the credit. When Grace looked through the files, she smiled and said, Monica, you've been smarter than he ever realized. According to these records, you're not just his wife. You're his business partner, and legally, you're the majority owner of Thompson Construction. Monica blinked, stunned. She had forgotten that when they first started, she was the one who had filed the paperwork under her name because David's credit was too poor to qualify for loans. She had done it to help him, never imagining it would one day become her greatest protection. Grace laid out a plan they would let David believe he had already won. They would let him walk into that courtroom full of pride, only to discover he had been standing on ground she owned all along. It was poetic justice, the kind that didn't require shouting or revenge, just truth. So while David flaunted Emily around town, taking her to expensive restaurants and posting smiling pictures, Monica stayed quiet. She continued, working in the background, waiting patiently. The more he laughed, the calmer she became. Every time he mocked her, she simply smiled because she knew that when the time came, the same arrogance that made him leave her would destroy him, and she wouldn't need to lift a finger to make it happen. The day of the hearing arrived, the courthouse buzzing with whispers as people watched David strut in wearing his designer suit, his watch gleaming under the light. Emily clung to his arm, dressed to impress her, smile smug and satisfied. They looked like a couple walking into a celebration, not a courtroom behind them. Monica walked in, quietly, her posture straight, her face calm. She wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, her presence commanding without trying, the kind of strength that didn't need words. David leaned over to Emily and whispered loud enough for Monica to hear after. Today she's history. Emily giggled and whispered back, I can't believe she's even showing up. He smirked and turned his attention to the judge, confident that everything was already decided in his favor. When the proceedings began, the judge reviewed the paperwork quickly, expecting a standard divorce settlement. David's lawyer stood up proudly, saying, my client has agreed to give his wife the house and one vehicle. He believes that is more than fair. Monica remained silent, but her attorney, Grace, stood up with a calm authority and said, respectfully, Your Honor, before we finalize anything, there is one unresolved matter regarding business ownership. David frowned, confused, then smirked again. Thinking it was a bluff, he said, she can have whatever she wants. I built that company from the ground up. Grace turned slightly toward him, her eyes sharp, and said, actually, Mr. Thompson, that is not accurate. The judge looked up, intrigued. Explain yourself, Ms. Williams. Grace began, presenting the documents one by one, the business license, the tax filings, the original incorporation forms, each bearing Monica's name. She explained that Monica was not only part of the company but held 51% of the shares, legally making her the majority owner and controlling partner. The courtroom went silent. David's confident smile vanished, replaced by a stunned blank stare. He leaned forward, shaking his head. That's not possible, he muttered. I started that company, Grace. Nodded, that may be true, but you started it with her money, her credit, and her name, and we have every record to prove it. The judge adjusted his glasses, reviewed the papers carefully, and finally said, I hereby recognize Mrs. Monica Thompson as the legal majority owner of Thompson Construction. David's mouth fell open. Emily's hand slipped from his arm, her eyes wide with shock. Grace looked at Monica and whispered softly, You just won without saying a word. Monica gave a small nod, her calm never breaking, while David sat there, realizing for the first time in years that the woman he had dismissed so easily had just taken back everything he thought was his. But Monica wasn't finished. She had waited too long and suffered too much to let the moment pass without leaving a message that would echo in David's memory forever when the judge asked if she wished to claim alimony or any further financial support. Monica stood up slowly, her hands steady, her voice calm and clear. She said, No, Your Honor, I don't want a single dollar from him. I only want what is legally mine, and I already have that. The room was silent. Even the judge seemed taken aback by her poise. He asked, Are you sure, Mrs. Thompson? She nodded. Yes, Your Honor, I don't need his money. I just need him to understand what it feels like to start over the same way I helped him once. Her words carried a weight that made everyone in the courtroom lean in. David looked at her, his eyes full of disbelief, his pride crumbling piece by piece. Monica turned to him, her gaze steady and strong, and said softly, You left me for someone who only loved the man you became, not the man you were. But remember, David, I helped you become that man. Without me, you would still be dreaming instead of living those dreams, and you threw that away for attention and excitement. Emily, who had been sitting silently, suddenly looked uncomfortable, her fingers fidgeting. Her face pale, she turned to David and whispered, Wait, does this mean she owns the company, not you? He glared at her, trying to silence her, but it was too late. The truth was clear to everyone in the room. Emily stood up, her expression twisting into disappointment. She said, I didn't sign up for this, and without another word, she grabbed her purse and walked straight out of the courtroom, her heels clicking against the floor, each step echoing like the sound of finality. David sat frozen, his hands trembling. The same man who had once laughed in Monica's face was now left alone. Humiliated and broken, the judge tapped his gavel and said quietly, Mrs. Thompson, I admire your strength and dignity. This case is closed. Monica gave a polite nod, gathered her papers, and walked out, her head held high. No tears, no anger, just peace behind her. David sat staring at the empty chair where Emily had been, realizing too late that he hadn't just lost his business, he had lost everything. The woman he betrayed had turned her silence into justice, and the woman he chose had vanished at the first sign of struggle. Weeks passed since that unforgettable day in court, and the news of what had happened spread like wildfire. People couldn't stop talking about the woman who walked into a courtroom broken and walked out a boss. David tried calling Monica countless times, leaving long, desperate voicemails, apologizing, begging for a chance to explain, saying he had made a mistake, but Monica never responded. She had learned that some words didn't deserve a reply. Instead, she poured her energy into rebuilding the company under her full control. She changed its direction, turning Thompson Construction into a business that supported community projects and funded scholarships for young Black women who wanted to study business and engineering. She wanted her story to mean something more than pain. She wanted it to show strength, resilience, and rebirth. She became a quiet inspiration. Her interviews went viral, her calm wisdom reaching thousands of women around the world. When one reporter asked her how she managed to forgive, Monica smiled and said, Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about freeing yourself from the weight they left behind. Her answer was simple, but it carried the strength of every tear she had once shed. David, meanwhile, found himself working for another company, his pride gone, his name forgotten, his wealth spent. The same friends who once praised him now avoided him. The same woman who called him her love now pretended not to know him. Sometimes he would drive by the office building that still bore the name Thompson Construction and stare at it with regret, remembering how his arrogance had destroyed the only person who ever truly believed in him. Monica had moved on. Her peace was her power, her success, her revenge. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. She had already Won not through anger or revenge, but through grace and wisdom, she became a living reminder that no betrayal, no heartbreak could stop a woman who knows her worth. And that's how Monica turned heartbreak into triumph, proving that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. Remember, no matter who betrays, you never forget who you are, because true power isn't in revenge, it's in peace, strength, dignity, power. Never underestimate a woman who knows her worth.